Good morning, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and a good night. I am King Figley. This is Gaming Imperfectly, and welcome to the channel, guys. Welcome to 2021. Welcome, one and all, because today I got a head scratcher for you. It's going to leave you completely baffled. We're missing 411 cases. This year, guys, we're going to be covering ones that are just completely cuckoo. And starting off this year with this case, I can't think of anything better, because when I read this one, it literally kept me up at night. Dr. James McGrogan, or Jim as he was known to his friends and his family, was an avid outdoorsman, and he was kind of a beast of a physical specimen. I mean, this man was impressive. He ran triathlons, marathons. I mean, this dude was at the epitome, the apex of being in shape. And not only that, he was super smart, because the guy is a doctor, you know, but he loved the outdoors, and everybody in Jim's family knew this. And at 39 years old, he probably was in the best shape of his life. I mean, just a beast. So what was going on at that point in time in his life was Jim needed a little break from the ins and outs of being a doctor, which is a highly stressful job. So what did Jim decide to do? Jim decided to go to Colorado with a couple of his friends to go skiing and do some outdoors type stuff. And what better way to blow off the steam, right? So what did Jim do to get ready for this trip? Well, because Jim was a smart fellow, Jim took an avalanche preparedness course. Jim took a survival course about surviving in the wilderness. And again, got all of his buddies together. They talked it out. He told his wife and his family what he was doing. He had it all planned out, guys. This guy was a meticulous planner, as well as being in top physical shape. So, on March 14th, he left his home behind and went to Vail, Colorado with a bunch of his friends. And while they were in Vail, which sits around 9,000 feet, they started plotting out which way they were going to go, which was to hike up to this place called Eiseman's hut. And it was somewhere around 12,000 feet. That means they have to rise in elevation a little distance, you know, from the trailhead up to Eiseman's hut was a gaining of elevation around 1,200 feet. So it's an impressive climb. And so Jim, being the outdoorsman and being in shape like he is, and being geared to the nines, guys, he had everything you could imagine. Jim had in his backpack blankets, food, water. He had a GPS, a working GPS. He had his cell phone with him, guys, with an extra battery just in case. He was prepared. He even had a shovel, like a little entrenching tool, a little e-tool that he had with him. He had a helmet. I mean, he had rented all of this gear in preparation to this hike. And even though this hike wasn't like super strenuous, I mean, it's a well-maintained trail, but because it does climb in elevation and you are going into the wilderness, you have to be ready. And Jim was. He was absolutely ready. So that morning, around 8 o'clock in the morning, they all got to the trailhead to head up to Eiseman's hut and began their trek. And it was beautiful. The weather was good, but there had been recent snowfall, heavy snowfall, in fact. Now remember, this is March in Colorado. So they had just had some like heavy recent snowfall, spring snow, you know. And sometimes those are the worst. And the snow was, in places, there were drifts up to 30 feet deep off the trail. But the trail itself, guys, was completely maintained and well traveled. A lot of people went up to this place. It was a regularly climbed course, this trail, this hiking trail. And so even though there was tons of snow off the trail, it was mounded, in fact, off the trail. The trail was well packed, and they were completely, you couldn't lose it. So the snow was piled up on the sides of the trail because of the recent snowfall and how deep it was, that on the trail, even though the trail was clearly defined, if you left the trail, you would immediately be in super deep snow and you would see tracks. I mean, that's just the way it was. So as they're going up this trail at 8 o'clock in the morning and they're just having a grand time, not everybody that was with Jim that day was as in shape as Jim was. So about 10 o'clock in the morning, everybody else is just dragging behind, you know. I mean, they couldn't keep up with Jim. And Jim, being the horse that he is just plowing ahead. And they're like, hey, Jim, we need to take a break, man. We got to rest a little bit. Now, because again they had planned this trek out and they had prepared this whole excursion, they had scheduled stops along the way of the trail because it is a hard climb. Even though it's a well-maintained trail and even though it's considered really an intermediate trail for people who are into hiking, not a super hard trek or anything like that, it's still steep. And so they knew that they were going to need to take breaks. And so they had made scheduled stops on the trail. So when they reached their first scheduled stop, they were like, yeah, we're done, Jim. We got to take a break. And Jim, being the man that he was, said, well, I'm not tired yet, guys, so I'm going to push ahead to our next stop, and I'll meet you guys there. Now, as you know, guys, with all the missing 411 cases that we've covered, anytime this happens every time. At the point of separation, there's always a point where one person says something to somebody else or they turn their back for a minute. It happens every time. And this was it for Jim. Jim took off to go to the next place. His buddies rested. They finally got up. They took back off. They got to the next stop where Jim said he would be, and no Jim. But remember, as they're going up this trail, the snow on either side of this trail is mounded up so high because of the recent snowfall, you could see if anybody had left the trail. I mean, and they never noticed anything. So when they got to the second stop and Jim wasn't there, you know, they really didn't think much of it because Jim is, again, such a physical specimen of a man and being in such phenomenal shape, he just probably, to their thought processes, just plowed ahead. They just kept going, you know. So they went to the next stop and no Jim. And eventually they made it all the way up to Eiseman's hut. They made it to where they were going and Jim wasn't there. And now they were concerned. So they looked up and down. They went up and down the trail. They started looking for Jim. They're calling for Jim. They tried to get Jim on his cell phone. No Jim. And that is something that's super important to understand, is that they had cell phone service, guys. This entire trail from the trailhead and up to Eiseman's hut, even though it gained an extraordinary amount of elevation, they still had absolutely fantastic cell service because there was a cell tower nearby, and even though they were up on a mountain, in fact, the higher they got up on the mountain, the clearer signal they got from the tower. So there was total cell service. No sign of Jim. At 5:30 p.m., they went down the mountain. They got the authorities. They alerted them that Jim had gone missing, and they started the search. And in fact, they started a humongous search, a monumental search for Dr. McGrogan. During the search, they actually had 3 helicopters looking for Dr. McGrogan, for Jim, and they searched 18 square miles. The search went on for 5 days, but then a snowstorm came in and it actually stopped the search, which again is something that always seems to happen with the missing 411 cases, or at least a good portion of the time, is that either weather starts immediately after the bad weather, either sets in immediately after these people go missing, or it sets in shortly after. But in the case of Jim McGrogan, they searched for 5 days with no luck. And they had dogs. They went up and down the trail. And with these 3 helicopters up in the air, guys, you have to understand, as they're looking down the aerial view because of all the fresh snow that they had had, again, they would have had a wonderful view of any tracks diverging or leaving the trail. And there were none. None whatsoever. It is truly like Jim McGrogan had just vanished from this area. No trail at all. But here's the thing. When that snowstorm set in after 5 days of searching and they had to call off the search, leaving everyone completely baffled, they didn't understand how strange it was going to get. Because 20 days later, 4.5 miles away, 2 hikers found Dr. McGrogan's body, and it was freezing cold, guys. So he was on an ice shelf at Brook Creek Falls. So it was a waterfall area 4.5 miles away. But understand this, when I say it was 4.5 miles away, that's 4.5 air miles, guys. That's not 4.5 from where he was if Dr. McGrogan went on foot, which is what we would have to assume that he did. He didn't fly. So the weird part is that the trail, there was no signs of tracks leaving the trail. 20 days later, Dr. McGrogan's body is found 4.5 air miles away at Booth Creek Falls. Now, if we look at a map of where he originally started and where he went to do this, guys, on foot, Dr. McGrogan would, and being in impressive physical shape, I can respect this, but remember what I said about the snow. There is drifts of snow 30 feet deep off of this trail in places. And to do what he did, Dr. McGrogan would have had to have left that trail, then gone up, all right, over a mountain that was 12,000 feet. So gain elevation of over 1,200 feet, then go down in elevation about 1,100 feet, and then there was a creek. And then he would have to cross that creek and then go back up another mountain about 1,200 feet in elevation, and then come down the other side of that another 1,100 feet to end up at that waterfall to where he was at. And to do this, guys, you're not going up and over mountains like that when you're mountain climbing. You're using switchbacks, and you're having to really take your time. So the true scope of what happened to Dr. McGrogan is that if he did this on his own, he left the trail, somehow got lost, never used his working GPS, never used his cell phone even though he had cell phone service, with no skis on, because I'll tell you, his body when it was found had his skis on his backpack, so he wasn't wearing his skis, and then crossed 2 giant mountain ranges that would have actually equated to anywhere, for, depending on his route, 12 to 16 foot miles, and sometimes snow that had drifted 30 feet. Gaining and dropping elevation of thousands of feet. This trip would have taken this man weeks on foot in the weather that he was in, even in the phenomenal shape that he was in. And again, he had to forego using his GPS, using his cell phone, both of which worked. Because when his body was found, and that leads me to the super duper strangeness of this all, he was found with his helmet on, but his coat wasn't on. His coat was in his backpack. His boots were never found. His feet, he had socks on, but his boots were nowhere to be found. They were completely gone. He had his pants were gone, but he had black long johns on that were still on. All right, and he had his helmet on. In his backpack, he had all his survival equipment still. He had his GPS, which was still working. He had his cell phone, which did turn on and did work. All right. So when the authorities came in and they found Dr. McGrogan's body and they're looking at this, they take him to the coroner, they get him out of there. And remember, his skis, which is a snowboard, he had a split snowboard. So when he had rented this snowboard and rented it, I'll show you a picture of the split snowboard. It actually splits in two like a pair of skis. So you can actually go uphill in these things and this, that, and the other. But they were on his back. So they took him to the coroner. Jim McGrogan's autopsy was performed, and the coroner said that when he took off Jim's helmet, remember he was wearing a helmet, that Jim had sustained heavy or severe head trauma, as well as he had what was, and I don't know what it was, it's just listed as trauma to his ribs, and he had a broken femur. The cause of death was listed as he fell, that Jim took a long fall, and a severe fall killed him. But here's the problem. Again, guys, and I'm not saying he didn't fall, but where did he fall from, first of all? How did he get there is the most important part. How did Jim McGrogan, a super intelligent doctor in phenomenal shape, get lost on a completely open and clear trail that couldn't be mistaken as anything but a trail? Leave a trail and then go off-road in the wilds of Colorado with 30-foot snow drifts at places, and then ascend and descend thousands of feet of elevation to sustain some sort of falling trauma 4.5 air miles or up to 16 foot miles away from where he originally was supposed to be. What happened to Dr. McGrogan during his point of separation at 8:30 in the morning and 10 o'clock in the morning when at 10 o'clock in the morning when him and his buddies took their first break and he pushed forward to the next stop? Something happened to him, guys, and I would love to hear your opinion on it, so please leave me something in the comment section below. What a baffling case, right? Dr. Jim McGrogan. His case is still unsolved to this day as far as what actually happened to him, although he does have a cause of death that he fell and it was outdoors and this, that, and the other, and nothing nefarious is considered to have happened. I think it's awfully weird. Strange oddity, for sure. And I'd love to hear your opinion on it. So leave me something in the comment section below. But that's it for King Pigley today. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed this story, you like this video, please smash in that like button. It helps me out. Lets me know you're enjoying the content. And that's about it for guys. I don't have anything else. I'm a little confused by this one. I'm going to go scratch my head for a while, put some thought into it. Because like I said, this one kind of kept me up at night. But that's it. I'm out of here. I will see you guys in the next video.